today. Um, see here. One second, trying to find the PowerPoint. So, all right. Okay, so welcome to my presentation on pulp characters. If you're not familiar with what a pulp character is, or just pulp itself, that's referring to just the papers that books and newspapers were, printed on, back late 19th and, yeah, it's about mid 20th century itself. Whole concept there with the pulp characters relate to the idea of, well, that paper with those publications were published on. Now, to give some context to all of this, we need to kind of just look back, get into the 19th century just a little bit to understand the importance of what the pulp characters are and what goes on with these type of publications. In the 19th century, it's kind of about mid 19th century, you had a number of publications, little dime novels, if you will, that were published that related to events relating to the Old West itself. The papers that those adventures were printed on were basically acidic type paper and deteriorated over time. And so it's not very many of these publications are real left behind nowadays. There are some collectors out there who are really die-hard fans of those type of stories and have them in their personal collections, but you don't touch them. Okay, you touch them, they'll probably still last right there in your fingers, and so they're very protective of them. And so they're very highly valued. And there's so many different stories from the 19th century, like 1860-ish on to the early 20th century, where a lot of those are kind of just lost in time. But those stories related mostly a lot to a big thing that was popular even to people in the 19th century, the Old West. Cowboys. You gotta love cowboys. Shoot them up, good guys, bad guys, black hats, white hats, the whole nine yards. Back then, they loved it. Millions of copies of those publications were printed, and people were eating them up left and right. All classes of society were eating it up, even across the world, eating it up. But all things were, or we're just black and white, good guys, bad guys. You still have some good guys, well, bad guys, I should say, who were the type of people that you wouldn't think they would do good things, but would still come around and help the damsel in distress type of situation. So again, people love the Old West, even back in the 19th century, love to read these exciting, over exaggerated stories about life itself. We get into the 20th century. And so, like I said, around 1896, late 19th, into early 20th century, we're starting to see the type of paper change. You get the pulp type paper that is longer lasting. And you see these in newspapers and magazines and books. And we start seeing other changes as well. People, all those are interest in cowboys. There's also a fading away of interest, and people become more focused on their lives in an industrialized society. Cities are growing. More the populations themselves are getting bigger. And with big cities and larger populations, you also have crime. And with crime becomes a need for people crying out for help. And a lot of these times for help, people want to fantasize on what that help is. And so when we get into the 1920s, 30s, we start having other problems as well. The Great Depression. And people really need an outlet to get away from the stresses of life itself. So when we get into the 1930s, we're seeing more of not just pulp stories being created, but we also have other forms of entertainment. Movies, big thing to go to. But since there was no TV back then, at that time frame, you had radio as well. And radio drama became a very big thing for audiences. People would sit around the radio at specific times of the day, especially at night, and listen to their favorite radio drama. One of them is like great detective stories. And in great detective stories, we have one of our first characters introduced that become very popular in pulp characters themselves. So these pulp characters become an inspiration. And it's not just in the 1930s that we see these characters come about. We do see other forms of them in other ways before the 1930s, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But let's think about one of these. Got a question for you. Think about what I'm asking here. He uses the dark to hide. Criminals whisper his name in fear. Wealthy, he uses his money to fight crime. Who does that sound like?
Batman.
No. Sounds like him. The Shadow. The Shadow. Great detective stories. The radio drama I told you about. People love to listen to it. And there was a voice. There was a narrator to the stories. A very haunting voice that would lure the audience in. And with that voice, audiences became enamored by this character that really had no origin and had no background to him. They call him the Shadow. And there are actually people who go out to where the magazines for, there was even a magazine version of the Great Detective Stories that people could buy off the shelves. And people actually come in and said, oh, where can I find those Shadow detective stories? It wasn't Great Detective Stories, it was Shadow detective stories. So the owners of the detectives, great detective stores themselves decided, we can make money off of this. And so they actually created a character, a Shadow. And so, and so they started to create these radio dramas too with the Shadow. So radio dramas with the Shadow, publication of the Shadow. We start to see now this surgence is coming in of a character in pop culture in that time frame that's very popular. Nowadays, we don't really think about the Shadow. We see the influences of the Shadow himself. So he hides in the dark. In fact, in the radio drama itself, he had the capability of making himself invisible to the general public. Based upon his going across the Orient itself, he gained the ability to hypnotize people enough to make them think that he's invisible. So he'll come around and speak out of the shadows themselves to the villains, to the bad guys, to the evildoers themselves, and bring fear to them before he gets bam, 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 down to the ground. Okay. And with the shadow himself, he had a couple of catch lines that are very popular characters back in that time frame. Always, he would start off the show with this line: "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows." Along those same lines, okay? With a menacing laugh, always second way into the quote itself, following up the quote itself. That menacing laugh that people expected to hear it all the time. They ate it up. And at the end, when the shadow beats the bad guys, he will always end with this line: "The weed of crime bears bitter fruit. Right, the shadow. Cheesy stuff, but people ate it up. Okay? And just with the atmosphere of the radio dramas themselves, people are sitting there crowded around the radio, talking in the darkest cell. Is a shadow coming out? Who heard the shadow's voice? So, with that being such a popular venue, let's publish the stuff. And Roger for the book, he was putting out 2 novels a month for a while. Hundreds of these novels were put out over up to about 1950. Look at 1931 to about 1950. Do the math. Do the math, okay? I'm not doing math right now, I'm tired. But the popularity was there. The popularity was there. But from him, the publishers of the book decided, let's make more characters. Let's make more characters. Let's make another one. A little background on the shadow, but I'll get to the next character. Who is he? He's known as the man of a certain metal. He has a fortress of solitude in the Arctic. His first name is Clark. Who does that sound like? Well, you would think.
Not savage.
Doc Savage. So, he comes out about 1933. Put in perspective, the first Superman comic book is Action Comics #1. That comes out 1938. 1938, okay? That's 8 years after The Shadow, 5 years after Doc Savage, okay? So, he is known as the Man of Bronze. And because of the golden bronze tint hue of his skin, but he's also very muscular. Okay. He is a representation of the epitome of what a man can become based off of not only building up one's physique, he is also super smart. He increases intelligence, he studies, he learns as much as he possibly can, and then goes beyond that on top of that. He has a fortress of solitude in Arctic, some say Antarctic, some say both, but it's a place he goes away to meditate, to get away from, the drudgery of life itself. And in this fortress of solitude, he has in his invention that he uses to fight crime with, along with a variety of items that he has taken from the bad guys that they use to try to take over the world and kill many people with. It's this hideout, this place to get away from everybody and everything. And his name is Clark Savage Jr. Okay. Now, keep in mind, Clark is kind of a popular name back in this time frame too. And it makes sense that for DC Comics to name their superhero Clark Kent because there's an actor by the name of Clark Gable who is quite popular in this time frame too. Quite a ladies' man and Wind would swoon at the sight of him. If you don't know who Clark Gable is, ever watch Gone with the Wind? He played Rhett Butler. If you don't know who he is, and Frank, my dear, I don't give a damn. So, but it's not uncommon for these creators, these characters, to use inspiration as well from Hollywood, from actors and such. And even not only use names, but also to have the way that they're depicted in drawings to kind of be based off of a popular actor at that time. Now, Doc Savage did not really have as many, really have radio dramas. It was more along the lines of his publications that go on from about 1939 to about 1950 as well. 1950, you're starting to see more of a decline too, as far as the pulp type novels. You're starting to see a lot of this popularity wane for a variety of reasons. There's a whole lot of reasons why, but comic books are becoming more of a popular thing by the 1950s too. But there are other issues within the government, wherein the government starts seeing there was a book entitled Seduction of the Innocents that came out to show, oh, society is corrupting the mind frame of our children. Therefore, more oversight is needed over what our children do read. And so you start seeing more of a comic code authority brought in with comic books. But the bond material in these novels, become frowned upon as far as being popular stuff for reading too. That's a whole other lecture right there. But we see with these characters, these ideas of what starts to institute the foundation for what we get into with our comic books themselves. Okay. I mean, Doc Savage, the epitome of what a man is supposed to look like and be like. Oh, here comes in, 1938, Superman. Okay. Just the name itself, Superman, says a lot right there. He's above your average man. He is represented as being above your average man. He goes far beyond what Doc Savage is. Here, Doc Savage built himself up this way, but Superman has more of an alien connection itself. Okay? So we see how the comic books start to take this inspiration from what these characters are. And you think about Doc Savage. We see something else that becomes kind of the influence too as far as other areas. And it's not uncommon for these characters too. Even the Shadow has a number of allies that team up with them, but not as strongly as with Doc Savage. Whoop. He had allies like Monk Mayfair, a chemist, Brooks, a lawyer, John Renwick, a construction engineer, Long Tom Roberts, an electrical engineer, William Longjohn, an archaeologist and geologist. All of these are individuals who are experts in their fields who team up with Doc Savage to fight crime. And in these stories themselves, some characters are stressed more than others. Two of the most popular ones are Monk, who had this kind of like a Cro-Magnon look to him, and his friend slash frenemy, I guess you could say, Ham, the lawyer, slim guy, who back and forth, Ham being the monk, being like an ape, Ham always made fun of his appearance, and Ham was this intellectual, he is this lawyer, and they did have like little back and forth little feud, wherein they also had a couple of pets, where Monk had a pet pig that was used as kind of like taunt to tease Ham because of Ham's first name. But to counter that, Ham had a pet monkey to counter Monk's tease there as well. And so, and the stories themselves would stress a lot of times the Monk and Ham interaction. You could tell there was that hate-love relationship between the two of them. They would insult each other, but at the same time, they came down in a tight situation. They were there for each other in need. The other friends, not stressed as much, but they were there when needed to help out Doc Savage in a tight situation. So we see these sort of things go on in the comic books too, where you oftentimes have the main hero who needs allies. They can't fight the crime by themselves. They need friends that help them out to join in the big fight against evil itself. And so, so it's an ongoing, inspiration that's taken place in the comic books that built off of this too. Now, any questions so far before I move on to the next thing? I'm saying a lot. I'm going to a little bit of a break at questions. No? Find it fascinating or Should I stick the shadow on you? Because he knows. Right. Now, I don't want to say that these are the only characters because there are many others. Too many to go into account about, but the spider, not Spider-Man, okay, but the spider. Get into the mindset of this theme here. You know, the shadow had his aliases like Lamont Cranston among them. Um, and there is a wealth connection there as well to him. Doc Savage is also wealthy. Richard Wentworth, a millionaire playboy. Who does that sound like? Millionaire playboy? Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne. Peter Parker's not a millionaire playboy. Barry holding on to a girl. Um, and the spider, well, Richard Wentworth has an old battle scar that would flare up during danger. What does that sound like? Like a spidey sense. Right. So, but this is still long before Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't come out till like 1961. Amazing Fantasy number 15 from Marvel Comics. So this is around 38, 39 with the Spider, give or take. So we're still seeing many more years before Spider-Man, but you have these connections. And with the Spider, his stories will oftentimes deal with his taking on this one nefarious bad guy or multiple nefarious bad guys and multiple adventures where you have multiple deaths, huge body counts of civilians being killed based off of the bad guys' schemes. Thousands killed. And so therefore the spider has to stop them. Of course. Who else will? Well, I guess Shadow and Dot Cybers, but they're not part of these stories. So hey. Have another character. The Avenger. Not Avengers, Avenger. Richard Henry Benson, globe-trotting adventurer, and millionaire. He sees his wife and daughter killed, and of course, vows vengeance. Skilled at disguises, and there's elements of the Shadow and Doc Savage mixed in with the stories too, and goes around the world to take on the bad guys as well. So both of these characters, the Spider and the Avenger, are also still from the same publisher as Doc Savage and the Shadow. So they're trying to build off of the popularity of the characters they've already created. These characters are not as popular as the Shadow and Doc Savage, but they're still bringing a lot of money at that time frame too. But it wasn't always just the guys that got involved. You had the ladies too. But the ladies look, in this case, like with Domino Lady, seductive looking, and she uses her beauty and other attributes to help out in taking on the bad guys. Okay. And so, and of course, like with the Avenger, she's out there to seek vengeance for, in this case, for those criminals who killed her father, a district attorney. And her main weapon is a 45 and a syringe of a knockout drug. So, lure the guy in, snick, there you go. Haha, I got you. So, using again beauty as a weapon. Beauty kills the beast. Okay. So, but along with Doc Savage, you also have Pat Savage, a cousin. Kind of sounds like Superman there too, doesn't it? Who shows up later in Superman's life? Supergirl, his cousin. But Pat Savage was before Supergirl as well. Okay. And she also wants to go off on an adventure with Doc Savage and all his friends, but she's not as well trained as Doc Savage. But she does it anyway because she's strong-willed, headstrong. I'm going out there anyway. Okay. He often discourages her to join in because she's not as skilled, but she does it anyway. So Even with Supergirl, you have a certain degree of influence because here we got a cousin to our protagonist, our hero. Okay. But she doesn't come from the old world. She's just they're part of the family, you know. So the characters, you know, continue on like this, you know, and you have these street level characters that become important to this idea of, hey, crime is being fought in a city. These people, these characters are helping to save society from the evil in life itself. We should feel safe. It's a release. It's an escape. Just like with us when we read a novel, read a comic book, watch a TV show, watch the movies. We want our escape. We feel comfortable. We feel free. We feel safe that hey, good can conquer evil in the world. And this is what's happening in these stories themselves, in the pulp novels themselves, in the radio dramas, even in movies and movie serials. For the Shadow himself, not necessarily with Doc Savage or with the Spider and the Avenger, the Shadow actually ended up in movies back in the 1930s and 1940s. I can't say they're great movies, but they were movies. There even was even one movie serial with the Shadow. Now, what do I mean by movie serial? Anybody know what I mean by that? No, movie serials. That's what it entails, yes. So, but in movies, you don't see it today. But it was a popular thing at one time to where you go to a movie, you pay for your main feature, sometimes it can be a double feature. But there was that movie serial that came before that dealt with the adventures of some character. It could be a cowboy, it could be a detective. When Superman became popular, Superman movie serials, even Shazam had movie serial. You had like Commander Cody, who was like a forerunner before Rocketeer years before. But there's like 15, well, about 15 parts to them, maybe more at times. And it lasted about 20 to upwards to 30 minutes before the movie. And you have the, part one, where you'll go through a number of events that the main character would go through, the hero would face. And at the very end, cliffhanger. It could be literally the hero hanging off the side of a cliff, hence cliffhanger. Or there's the hero inside the shack. There's dynamite. The shack blows up. Did he get out? Well, yes, he does in part two. Episode two, too. So you have to continue it. But it was like that every week. You had to come back to the movie theater to watch the next part. So those movie serials become an inspiration for other things too. Are you familiar with Indiana Jones? That's where Steven Spielberg got the ideas. Movie serials. The entire movie is one cliffhanger after another cliffhanger after another cliffhanger. He draws inspiration from what those days were of the movie serials. They ate it up. I ate it up when I was a kid too. Once watched them in reruns. I was not alive back then. Keep that in mind. Not that old. Okay. But they're cheesy little features because the special effects not the greatest, acting laughable, but people ate it up. They gave that escape. And of course, it gave the studios a chance to say, "Oh, we draw people back in to see part two. It means more money for the movies too." Okay, so it's capitalism at its best in that regard. So, but the Shadow had a movie serial, also movies, even a 1994 movie with Alec Baldwin. And it's going, oh, yeah, it's good. It's good. I'm not saying the best, but better than the quality of back in the 1930s and 1940s. Even Doc Savage had a movie in the 1970s. We don't talk much about that. I want it part of my collection because I love Doc Savage, but oh my God, it's easy. It's horrible. It is horrible. But they tried. They really tried to bring the character back then. There's even a common recurring resurgence of trying to bring back Doc Savage into the movies. Um, I don't think that the director, but Shane Black. Are you familiar with a director named Shane Black? Did y'all watch Iron Man 3? He directed Iron Man 3. Another movie I can think of off the top of my head is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He likes the little noir type movies, okay? And so, but he directed Iron Man 3. And he was wanting to bring in a new Doc Savage movie, which I was eager to see, but I was not eager as far as his actor choice to play Doc Savage. An actor is used quite often nowadays. He's big, he's bulky. There you go. I just can't picture The Rock as being super intelligent. Oh, he's not out there. So I just can't picture it. And it's a band of bronze. Can't see it. The bulk, the strength, yes, I can see that. But anything else along those lines, no. But it's kind of faded off into the sunset as far as that movie. So it's going to happen. I don't know. Hopefully, the different actor. Don't get me wrong. I like The Rock. My wife and I saw Black Adam. Love Black Adam. No spoilers. Spider-Man shows up. Sorry. Multiverse going on here, people. But I'm not doing spoilers. No, it's a good movie. Enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. Oh, my wife, people. Actually embarrassed now. But there's still that love for the characters, and there's still people out there who want to bring the characters back. You do have conflicts with the Shadow and Doc Savage. Now, well, mainly the Shadow, not as much with Doc Savage. And they're even, if you find them, you can find them, even team ups with Doc Savage and the Shadow in current comic books too. Okay. So it shouldn't be that expensive to find either. Not that I'm pushing the comic books only on. But the Spider, the Avenger, Lady Domino, they still show up too. Not as popular, but they still show up in current comic books, mainly like Dynamite Comics. But who they are and what they are, of course, bring that inspiration. So, but that's street level characters. It's more than just street level that is involved here. Before those characters, you have these. The Phantom. You familiar with the Phantom? Okay. Tarzan. Rima the Jungle Girl? No, you don't. Even though it's kind of like, I did some research on this. That who? Are you familiar with Sheena? Okay. Well, Rima is more of an inspiration for Sheena, who becomes later on, like in the 1930s, 1940s. Conan. I'm wearing the shirt, so you should at least be familiar that way. So all these characters came out, most of them came out before Doc Savage and the Shadow. And they become part of the pulp culture too, in their own way. And with them, we have the other inspiration. Rima, the Jungle Girl, becomes more of an inspiration for Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Girl left off in the jungle to fend for herself, and then fights lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. There was even a movie back in the 1980s with Sheena, the Queen of the Jungle. Anyway, there was Tarzan. It was a bad movie. Tell you how bad. Budget was so bad, so low, they had to have zebras in the movie. They got horses and painted them with stripes. Yeah. The Phantom. One picture of the Phantom right there. He is like the first character we have that becomes an inspiration for superhero costumes. We see him primarily in comic strips at first. But Tarzan, we do see later on in the movies. There's actually a movie, Green Mansions, that's based off of Rima. That came out 50s, I think. Had Audrey Hepburn playing Rima. And also had Anthony Perkins playing the love interest. You know who Anthony Perkins is? You ever seen Psycho? Norman Bates. That's Anthony Perkins. At one time, Anthony Perkins was a heartthrob. That's somebody different. That's Anthony Perkins. He's not a heartthrob. No. Norman didn't eat people. He just killed them. Left them behind in chairs. But even Conan the Barbarian, who's actually, this is his 90th anniversary this year, as far as being around. There have been movies, of course, Conan the Barbarian. Oh, yeah. You know, the remake later on in 2000. Okay, well, whatever. So, but TV series, that was kind of bad too. But anyway, but multiple comic books with him, Marvel Comics primarily, but other publications too. So, and Tarzan, who can movie after movie and TV show after TV show, you know, um, interesting connection here. There was an actor who did a TV show with who played Tarzan, Ron Ely. You may not even know that name, but he also later on played the movie version of Top Savage. So the reason why I wanted to see it too, because I like Ron Ely as playing Tarzan. So some interconnection there with actors playing different roles too. But going beyond that, from the jungle uh, into outer space, John Carter. Remember John Carter? There's a movie that came out early 2000s. Excellent movie. Disney screwed it over big time. There should have been sequels to it. Yes, it was. Flash Gordon. Now, don't get confused the early versions of Flash Gordon with the 1970s movie. Okay. Cult classic, but oh god, it's cheesy. So, but and Buck Rogers. Remember Buck Rogers? Now, Buck Rogers, veteran of World War One, goes to Pennsylvania to work in a mine. A gas knocks him out, and it leaves him in a suspended animation until the 25th century. Work with it, people. Just go with it. Just work with it. Okay. There's even the TV series that came out in the 70s with Gil Gerard as Buck Rogers. Came out as a movie first and a TV series. Okay. So, but guess who took big inspiration from John Carter, Flash Gordon, especially Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers? Take a guess. Oh, actual person, director. A little bit, but somebody else. Yeah, he drew inspiration, especially from Flash Gordon. In fact, he really wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie first before he made this very popular movie series. That's right. In fact, he really wanted for the scroll you saw at the very beginning of the movie, he wanted that to have references to Flash Gordon instead of what it says now. Because he has such a big impact upon him as far as that character. And like I said here, the characters themselves started off as comic strip characters, but then you started seeing movie serials, specifically with Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, starring a famous Olympian swimming athlete back in the time frame, Buster Crabbe. He played both characters at the time. Okay. And they were in the movie serials at that time frame. Okay. In fact, let's see if we can get out of this. Look at this scroll. Very familiar, right? Flash Gordon. Gee, what is that? Huh, what happened here? What did George Lucas do? He borrowed the idea from that scroll from the beginning of these movie serials, used that inspiration in with his movies themselves. In fact, while I was doing this presentation, getting it ready, I was thinking, that semester I want to do a thing about Star Wars, where George Lucas got his inspiration for his ideas. It's more than just this. There are a lot of other areas where you get inspiration from. To be continued next semester. So, but what we have here, is this love for these characters themselves. And the people who grew up with them, they wanted to do something with them. They wanted to carry that over. Even people who did not grow up in that time frame, they wanted to carry on the ideas of what these characters represent. And as such, we start losing sight of Shadow, Doc Savage, John Carter, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, the Spider, the Avenger, Rima, the Jungle Girl, Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, Lady Domino. Were they? That's the question that's asked so often of these characters themselves. But they were at one time hugely, hugely popular. People loved them. They want to read, they want to listen, they want to watch what these characters would do week after week, adventure after adventure. Time caught up with them. People's interests changed. New characters came around that maintained a longer longevity to them. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Captain America, X-Men, Fantastic Four. The list goes on. And so with them, it's lost as far as who the other characters are. Even when the John Carter movie came out, I remember people saying, this is just Star Wars. They ripped off Star Wars. No. George Lucas ripped off Flash Gordon, John Carter, and Buck Rogers. It all came before. And that's what you got to keep in mind. There are things that have come before what we have now that we draw inspiration from. Even these creators drew inspiration from ideas. Going back to the Cowboys that I mentioned, Doc Savage, the Shadow, all those characters are inspiration from Cowboys. Okay? So never lose track of that. You see something new out there, start asking yourself, did something come before this new thing? More than likely, yes. Questions? Yes. When you leave, you can, yes. All right. That's the end. Yes, sir. Because they're taking out the bad guys who are killing a lot of people. Because criminals are stealing from society, they're killing innocent people, and these heroes are their intent is to protect the innocent. Like with the spider, the bad guys of the spider, they were killing thousands of people. Okay, so he's working on trying to stop thousands of people from dying. More. Okay, and so that means taking down the bad guy, either capture him or killing him. Then that's what's got to be done in that situation. Is killing right? No. But in the long run, if it means saving thousands of people, what's the balance? Okay. So, answer your question. Okay. Awesome. He has it back there. My favorite superhero,
Can you choose one?
Spider-Man.